Chris is a longtime friend and colleague. He is a science and educator and naturalist. He runs the California Naturalist Program at Camp Ocean Pines. And he's also a master falconer. So he's got a great deal of things to offer to us this evening. And Chris, we're so happy to have you here. Thank you for joining us. And I'm going to hand this over to you.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. And hello, Kingston. Nice to see you over there. And nice to see you, Charlie. Charlie, where's your partner? I've only seen one person on the couch there. Okay, hello, everybody. We're going to get started. And let me do this, share my screen. And let me get this going and make sure I'm doing this right. And see, Bob, are we okay?
Yes, looks good.
Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to talk a little bit about falconry, how it's a pretty cool thing. And we're going to go through a little bit of, okay, a little bit of history, falconry. We're going to talk about not just the ancient past, but some of the present, what's going on now in people who are interested in raptors. And then we'll have some questions at the end. So again, if you have some questions, write them in the chat to Michelle, and then she will ask questions at the end. Okay, and I hope that you're going to learn a few things. So it's always interesting just being the talking head and not having a classroom full of people who can respond, because I can't see any of you now. And so I'm just going to be talking to myself and my own PowerPoint. So here we go, okay? Okay, so it all begins with observation. There are some amazing birds out there, and when you see them, especially when I'm driving south towards Pismo Beach, there's a rock in the middle of the freeway, and there's always some big raptor on the top. Or if I'm out bird watching and you see a falcon go by, those birds are incredible, they're beautiful, they're fast, and it's just a delight to watch them. So the whole thing about raptors and humans, it all begins with observation. So if you haven't gone out there, you should go out there now, because, well, maybe not right now, but tomorrow, because seeing the raptors in action is the start of anything that will move you on to the next step. So let's see, okay, the next step is, again, it's the observation step. So here are two peregrine falcons. These are juvenile peregrine falcons. The one on the left is a Peale's peregrine falcon, a subspecies up in Washington, Oregon. The one on the right is from San Diego area, so it's an Anatum peregrine falcon, but they're both juveniles. Again, it's the observation of these incredible birds that gets us started on this journey. Do you know what this bird is? Again, same bird, a close-up and a far away. What is it? I can't hear you. If you said red-tailed hawk, you're right, that's a red-tailed hawk. The one on the left is a juvenile. You can tell because the tail feathers are banded. A red-tailed hawk who's an adult has a salmon-colored hawk, generally speaking. And the one on the right has a darker brown eye, so that's an adult. You see the one on the left has more of a yellow eye, again, indication of a juvenile. But red-tailed hawks always have that dark armpit area. Do you see those dark armpits? That indicates it's a red-tailed hawk. Okay, this is the smallest falcon in North America. Do you know what it is? Let me hear you. Yep, you're right. It's an American kestrel. The one on the left is a female. The one on the right is a male. The male has some sooty blue, kind of a steely blue on his shoulders. Both male and female are beautiful birds, and this is the American kestrel, really small falcon. I'm just showing you some of the common birds that we can see, and you can all see these birds tomorrow if you went out to look. This is one that's a little harder to find, but is very common, and this is called a Cooper's hawk. Looks like a stealth aircraft flying by, but it's a Cooper's hawk, and he's a bird-eating bird. Most of the time you'll see them in trees, hiding, waiting for some birds to go by, and then it will chase after the little birds just like a policeman will chase after a speeder. And if he catches it, he eats it, and if he doesn't catch it, he goes back in the tree. kind of hiding, waiting for another one to come by. This is a bird that you'll see quite often harassing the little sparrows at your bird feeder, or if you have an outside aviary like cockatiels or pigeons or something, they will do whatever they can to get in there because they are bird eaters and they want to get into those birds. These are both adults. You can see their chest is a little bit orange and banded. We'll show you some juveniles a little bit later, but these are Cooper's hawks. So once you see these incredible birds and watch them hunting and flying, you can see why people have used them as symbols of strength and power and independence. You can see it on seals and crests and coinage, on flags. You can see it all over the world. It's not just a United States thing, it's all over the world. People have seen these incredible birds and have used them as symbols. So now we're going to go backwards a little bit. We're going to go back into ancient times. In ancient times, falcons were revered by the ancient Egyptians. In fact, you'll see them on the hieroglyphs on the walls. You'll see them in the forms of gods and goddesses, and you will see them even in the tombs, in jewelry, in statuary. And this one on the right, this is a mummified falcon. So they respected them so much that when they did some burials, they would mummify and decorate the burial, the mummy casket of the falcons. So they were revered in ancient times by the Egyptians, but we don't have any records that the Egyptians used them for falconry. The first partnership of falconry that I could find was dated in 5,500 BCE. It's in a tell or an archaeological site in Syria. And this is the oldest one I could find. So here we have this carving, and this carving shows a guy with a bird on his hand and also rabbit or some other game hanging down from his fist. So this is a very, very old record of falconry, the earliest falconry record that I could find. So while it started in Mesopotamia, again, 5,000 years ago, several thousand years before that even, 5,000 years ago, it was recorded in Mesopotamia area. So again, that's the area that's now Israel, Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, those areas. And then it moved on to Mongolia, China, Japan. Then it went over to Pakistan, India, and it finally got to Europe, but it didn't get to Europe until the 400s. And it became known as the sport of kings in Europe, in medieval Europe, where kings were allowed certain birds, dukes and duchesses were allowed other birds. And so it was considered the sport of kings there. Maybe we'll get to that a little bit later. But it didn't come to the United States until very, very late. There was a falconer on the boat with Christopher Columbus, but he didn't stick around and practice falconry. There were falconers on the boat with the Puritans who came over, but again, it didn't stick. Falconry got started in the United States, honestly, in around the 1940s with a handful of college guys back east. They thought, wow, look at this in the books, this thing about humans hunting with falcons and eagles. That sounds pretty cool. We should try it. And that's where it got started in the United States. Really not until the 1930s, 1940s, and it has moved on from there. Since it is worldwide, it is all over the place. There are falconers everywhere. It is considered a living human heritage activity by the United Nations because it has gone across cultures and spanned thousands and thousands of years, and in fact is still going in many, many countries around the world. And so since it's such a cosmopolitan activity that's happened across cultures and across centuries, it got this special recognition. And I think that just happened a couple of years back. So now let's talk about falconry. Falconry is the art and practice of hunting wild game with a trained raptor. And this picture is from The Eagle Huntress. You may have seen that movie, a really fascinating movie. And if you watch that movie, you see this young lady going through this 4-step process: trapping an eagle, then training the eagle. Most of the story is about training and how she trains her eagle and even wins some contests in the training. And then she goes out hunting with her dad. And then the last part of falconry is usually to release your bird after you've done a hunting season or two. We don't necessarily see that in the movie, but that's one of the steps in the falconry process. So I want you to remember that: trap, train, hunt, and release. Can you repeat after me? Ready? Trap, train. I can't hear everybody. Ready? Trap, train, hunt, and release. The truth is I can't hear anybody, but I'm pretending. So there are 4 steps. Let's go over those 4 steps, because this is kind of like a classroom. The first one is trap. Second one is, say it all together, train. The third one is, yep, you've got it, hunt. And the last one is release. Good. Okay, you ready for your test? There are 4 steps of falconry. It is, say it. Yep. Did you get it? Good, very good. I'm proud of you. I'm faking that I'm proud of you. I can't hear anything that anybody's saying. But there you go: trap, train, hunt, and release. So let's talk about each of those steps of falconry one by one. The first one is trap. So you can't go buy a hawk at a pet store. You used to in the old days before there were regulations, but you cannot buy a hawk at Petco or PetSmart. If you want to be a falconer, you have to trap your bird. So to trap a hawk, there's a hawk or there's a falcon or an eagle flying through the sky. How in the world do you trap one of those and get it in your hand? The first step is to really know your subject. So Michelle, who was on earlier with me, so if I wanted to trap Michelle, I would have to get to know what she really likes. Let's make it up. Let's say she likes Snickers bars. So I would have a Snickers bar and I'd say, "Hey, Michelle," and I'd whistle and I'd wave a Snickers bar and she'd say, "Oh, Chris, thank you very much." And I would give her the Snickers bar. And then I would say, "Okay, now I'm ready to trap her." So I'd go to a room, I'd get a whole pile of Snicker bars mounted up on a table, and I would, I don't know, dig a pit or put a net or something. And when Michelle came in the room, I'd say, "Hey, Michelle, look, there's a whole pile of Snicker bars right here." And she'd come running towards it and she'd fall in my pit or get caught in my net, and then I would trap her. So the first thing is you got to know what the bird wants. And most of these birds want a mouse or something to snack on that's a small little fuzzy nugget. And so once you know what they want and find out what they like, then you put a barrier. Now there's a lot of different types of traps. This is an ancient kind of trap called a Balchatri trap. And there are others. In fact, let's look at those other traps. The top left trap, that's a mist net trap. And so you have a little bait. The bait is the bird who's tied down there, and the bird is flapping around. And another bird will come fly in to try to get that bird, and then the net collapses around him. So that's a net. The bottom left is a special, it's called a goshawk trap. And so there's a little bird in a cage down below. The goshawk goes and tries to catch it, steps on that bar, and then those side panels come in on it, and then you have a trap that's hawked. The top right is a bow net. This is an old method of trapping. It's kind of like a mouse trap, but with a net on it instead of a snap. And so when the bird goes to get the bait, then he can trigger the bow, and then the bow goes over him, and then you have a bird in the net. The bottom right is called a phi trap. It's an ancient trap as well. There's a bait bird in the middle, a little starling there. And then the other bird, like a merlin, for example, will fly in after that bird, but flies through those little hoops that are slip knots and then gets caught on those nooses. Now, again, trapping is the very first step, but then the next step, step number 2, do you remember? There's trap, and then there's, that's right, train. Oh, and here's what happens. As soon as you get a, As soon as you're successful with the trap, then you've got another problem. You have a really angry, pissed off bird in your hands that doesn't want to be trapped. So it's like that dog who always chases the tire. What happens when he gets it? Oh, you got to be careful what you want. So if you're out trapping a hawk and you catch a hawk, now you have to be ready to do the next step, which is train the hawk. And the training is a lot like the trapping. It is will work for food. So going back to the person that I trapped Michelle, and now I know she really likes Reese's peanut butter cups, and she's all trapped in a net. She says, "Hey, Chris, what's all this with a net?" And I say, "Well, don't worry about the net. Look at all this candy." And then every time I see Michelle, I hold up a Snickers bar and I say, "Michelle, Snickers right here." And she says, "Oh, Chris, thanks," and comes and gets it. And then I just go, and she turns her head, knowing Chris has got to be around here someplace with a Snickers bar. And when she finds me, she'll come and get a Snickers bar. So this is called conditioned response. I usually do a whistle, or I have some visual marker when I give the bird a snack. And every time the bird comes for a snack, he hears the whistle or he sees the visual marker. The visual marker I start with is a glove. So I get the bird. Again, we have, in fact, let me go to this next slide real quick. So this is my friend Kat. She's back in Washington, D.C., working for the government right now, doing great things to protect our coasts. But we have a newly trapped bird, and she's staring at the bird, and the bird is staring at her. And so once you have an angry bird, you put some gear on its legs, and you have it restrained so neither you nor the bird will get hurt. And then you start the very slow process of manning or getting the bird used to humans. And the way you do that is with a snack on the glove, and you offer it and say, "Hey, you want a snack?" And the bird says, "You just caught me. I was out flying free. What are you doing?" And you say, "Well, yeah, I know, but here's a snack." And then the bird says, "I am hungry. I could use a snack." And so then he jumps to your hand and eats a snack. And then you put him back on the perch and say, "Hey, want another snack?" He says, "That was a really good snack." And so he hops to your glove again. And then you give him another snack. And you continue to do that until every time you whistle or hold up your glove, he comes to your glove. And then you have a long line. I don't know if you can see this. This is very faint. There's a line called a crayons tied to the falcon's leg. And then the boy in the picture has a lure. And so what that lure is a piece of leather on a string. By the way, that boy's name is Sage, and he just got his Eagle Scout rank just a month or so ago. I was very proud of him. And so when he swings that lure, the bird comes and he grabs the lure and gets a snack off the lure. And so you've trained the bird to your glove. Now you're training the bird to the lure. And the reason you do that is when the bird is flying free and might be half a mile away and he can't hear you whistle, you swing the lure and their eyesight is so good, they'll see the lure and go, "Oh, that's right. This is a great time to get a snack." And so he flies and grabs the lure. And when he grabs the lure, then that's part of training to get the bird back. So the first step of falconry is what? Trap. And the second step is train. So here's another final step of training, having the bird fly to you and fly from you. And flying to and from your glove while it follows you through the forest is an amazing feeling, because you've taken a bird out of the wild where it was not used to humans. You've taken the time to man this bird or get it used to humans, and you've trained him to come to your glove. And if he doesn't come to your glove, he comes to a lure, and now he's following you through the forest. So this process can take, a matter of 4 or 5 days to 10 days to 15 to 20 days, but usually around 2 weeks. So from a wild, angry bird off the net, off the trap, it usually is a couple of weeks before you can go hunting with a bird. Because remember, the third step of falconry, the first is trap, second is train, that's right, the third is hunt. And so we're going to now go hunting with the bird. And hunting is this partnership between humans and the bird. Now, this is where it all started in ancient times, because remember, if somebody was trying to feed their family And trying to catch a rabbit, it's hard to run after a rabbit and catch one, or it's hard to throw a rock and hit a rabbit. And so imagine if you're running around trying to catch a rabbit and then you see a hawk fly down, grab the rabbit, and then fly off. You might be thinking, wow, so hard for me, so easy for the hawk. And then somebody said, I wonder if I could work with the hawk and train the hawk so we could work together. So that's what falconry is. Falconry is hunting with a trained hawk. You trap and you train the hawk, and then you go hunt. Now, there are job responsibilities. The bird's job is to catch the game, but my job is to stomp through the forest and chase out a bunny or a quail or something, or a squirrel that might be hiding. And then when the hawk catches it, then I have to trade it for another snack. Because see, this is a partnership. And if you have a business partner and you steal from your business partner, they are not going to be your partner for very long. So once your hawk grabs a squirrel or a rabbit or a quail, then you cover it with your game bag or cover it with a towel or something. So the hawk looks down and says, I thought there was a rabbit right here. And then you get a little snack out of your pocket and say, hey, would you like to come up to my glove for a snack? And the hawk says, oh, sure, there's a snack. Let's go of the animal. You put it in your game bag, which you can see hanging off my shoulder there. And then you go hunting again. And that way you can hunt for 2 or 3 animals. When in the wild, the hawk would normally just hunt for one animal and then eat it and be done for the day. Now you can go get enough for the hawk and get enough for you. And that's how you feed your family in the old days, with hunting with a trained hawk. So see this bird on the bird on the left, that is a red-tailed hawk. That was the first red-tailed hawk I had years and years ago. And then the bird on the right is a Cooper's hawk. Now look at his eye, it's yellow, and his top shoulder feathers are more brownish. And his breast, if you can look right down there on his breast, I don't know if you can see my cursor, it's streaked. So this is a juvenile Cooper's hawk. Now this is that same bird as he's grown up. See, his eye is red, blood red, and his chest is orange, and he's eating a quail right here that he caught. So the goal of hunting, the goal of falconry, is to hunt birds with a trained raptor. Here's my friend James, and he's out hunting. He's got a Harris hawk on the left, and I don't know what he's got there on the right, but he's hunting out in the fields, and he's got a pole. So his bird is up on a pole, searching around, looking with his great eyesight, and James is walking through the fields, trying to kick up a bunny or a quail. And if he's lucky, then his bird will stoop down there and grab something and catch it, and James will come and trade it out. So the bird on the left is a kestrel, and I don't know what he's got there, maybe a blackbird or maybe a starling or something. And the bird on the right is a Harris's hawk. Kingston, remember that? The Harris's hawk, that's the wolf hawk from the cartoons. And he's got a bunny. And so that is hunting. Now the fourth step is release. Now hunting is a sustainable activity that we do in the fall and the winter. You don't hunt in the spring and the summer because that's when baby animals are being born. They're not so smart, too easy to catch, and you want to make sure that there's a chance for all those babies to grow up. So you want the mamas and daddies to have babies, so there's something to hunt in the fall and the winter. So after you hunt your bird a season or two, you will often let that bird go back into the wild. Now, when you trap a bird, you can only trap a first-year bird, a baby bird, not a baby, but a young bird. You're not allowed to take an adult bird out of the system because those adult birds are already mated up and having babies, and you don't want to reduce the number of birds in the wild by taking an adult bird. But about 80 to 90% of first-year birds are going to die. That's just the regular mortality rate for first-year raptors. And so if you take a young bird out of the system, it doesn't have an impact on the overall population. And if you take that bird and train it and teach it to hunt, then when you release that bird later on in the year, then he will be back into the breeding population because he's had good medical care, good treatment, and knows how to hunt. And that's the time falconers go to work, because they ditch work a lot during the fall and winter when they're hunting, and they go back to work, or they go do captive breeding. So birds are often released in the spring, because if you're a falconer and you have a bird, in the spring you can't hunt, so you're just feeding them and you're just letting them grow feathers, and so you're not flying your birds in the spring anyway. So it's kind of a boring time for falconry. So oftentimes if you have a wild caught bird, you release it in the spring. So remember that Cooper's hawk that had the blood red eye and the orange chest? These are my records, because we always keep records of our birds. There's some hidden columns in there about food and other notes. But I had this bird for 3 years or so, and then I figured it was time for him to go back into the wild. So I was marking in my notes that it's time for him to be released. So I took all of his gear off. So I was flying him with no gear, no telemetry, no bells, no jesses or anything. And so when he would fly free, if he decided to leave, he could be gone and be free back into the wild. But as you'll notice, I flew him free, and then he flew back and said, hey, I'm ready for dinner. And so I put him up for the night. And then the next day I flew him free again. He got to fly wherever he wanted. And then he came back again and again and again. And it was really funny, because there's a good looking female Cooper's hawk flying around after him saying, hey baby, I'm ready. If you would like to go make some babies, come fly around with me. So he flew free and returned, and then finally he did not return. So he's out there in the wild, hopefully making babies. And I think I've seen him come by a couple times, fly overhead. But we release our birds if they are wild caught. Now, if they are a captive bred bird, it can't be wild caught. Okay, now here's a Cooper's hawk flying free. Now, if you notice, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but those breast feathers are streaked. So this is a juvenile Cooper's hawk. See, there's a white rump patch, and they've got broad rounded wings and a long tail. So this is an accipiter, one of the branches of the hawk community. It's not a falcon. Falcons have sharp pointy wings. And so this is an accipiter. Okay, so now let's take a deep breath. If I had a glass of water, this is when I'd take a drink. But now we're going to go on to the next stage. We talked a lot about falconry, but now let's talk about other things. No, you cannot have a raptor as a pet. I know it seems like fun. They're cool looking. They're cool. They're fierce looking. It looks like it's a lot of fun. And in the USA, you cannot have a raptor as a pet. That means no hawks, no eagles, no owls, no falcons as a pet, because they are protected by the Migratory Bird Act. So even though whenever you make a treaty or an act like this, there's always some exceptions. And so there are specific exceptions, which means that you have to have a permit if you're going to be one of those exceptions. And we will talk about those exceptions in just a little bit. But I know you really want to be hands-on with a bird of prey. I know they are really cool, but you can't. So let's talk about those exceptions if you really want to be involved with it one way or the other. So there are 6 types. Okay, we've used 4 of our fingers for the methods of falconry, so we have 6 more fingers. So now you can figure out this whole talk if you have 10 fingers. So here it is. There are 6 ways that you can be involved with raptors. They are rehabilitation, education, falconry that we've talked about, abatement, breeding, and science. So the top 2 symbols there are the United States and the California Fish and Wildlife Services. Those are the ones who require the permits. And then you'll see some logos of some other organizations that are involved in those other 6 things. So here, let's go through them one by one. So rehab, you can get a rehab permit. Rehab is to fix broken birds. So here in San Luis Obispo, the main agency is called Pacific Wildlife Care. They're a great group. Dr. Shannon Riggs is the vet, and she's an excellent avian doc. She knows how to fix up birds and get them released back into the wild. There are other great avian docs in our area too, Dr. Susan Choi in Los Osos is an excellent veterinarian who knows all about hawks and eagles and falcons. So, so if there's a broken bird, you can get them fixed and released back into the wild. Now, this permit allows you 180 days, about a half a year, to fix and to release the bird. Now, here's the hard part. If the bird is non-releasable, they must be put down or put to sleep. The reason is that California doesn't want broken birds out there starving or being picked on or injured, and so they only allow healthy birds to be released back into the wild. And since you cannot have a raptor for a pet, if the bird is not healthy enough to be out in the wild, it has to be put to sleep. Now, this bleeds right into the next permit, and that is called, well, this is Pacific Wildlife Care. This, again, is one of the falcons of Morro Rock, and they've treated some of those. So Pacific Wildlife Care, every community has their wildlife rehab agency, and this is ours. So the next permit is called the education permit. And the education permit allows people to use non-releasable birds for education. If the bird is fixed and healthy and releasable, you can't use it for education. It has to go back into the wild. That's the whole point of rehab. So only if the bird's broken wing makes it unreleasable, can't fly, can't hunt for itself, can you use that for education. Or if it's blind, or if its tendons won't allow it to grip, or if it's a captive bred bird. These are the birds that are used for education. So that first permit was rehab. Most of the rehab agencies do that because they love animals and they can't bear to see one put to sleep. So most of them also have an education permit. Makes sense, doesn't it? If you love birds and you don't want to put them to sleep, then you get an education permit. So most of these agencies have a handful of raptors they will take around to schools to teach students, because it's important to pass along the message of ecology and conservation. So zoological parks, outdoor education centers like Camp Ocean Pines and other falconry schools have permits to use raptors for education. Just like to plug Camp Ocean Pines up in Cambria, this is one of those places in California, there's not a whole lot of them, that have a permit to do education with live raptors. In fact, if you would like to have a hands-on falconry experience, call Camp Ocean Pines and say, sign me up. When's your next one? I'm ready to do it. I will come out, I'll bring a hawk, and we will learn about falconry and we'll do some hands-on activities. We're not the only one. There is West Coast Falconry in California. They have something in Northern California. They also have a place down in San Diego County, and they are great folks. Kate Martin is the director there. She really knows her stuff, excellent falconer. And so there are places you can go have a falconry experience where you can maybe buy it as a birthday present for your best friend and go get a hands-on experience and learn about falcons and falconry. And I like taking birds to schools or to camps where kids can get a hands-on opportunity to see and handle and touch and see birds up close that they would never see in any other setting. So backing up, the first permit was, remember that was a while ago, that was rehab, that's right. And the second permit is this one, this is education, that's right. The next permit is falconry. We know all about that because we know there are 4 steps of falconry. Falconry is hunting wild game using a trained raptor. To become a falconer, if you would like to do that, in California, you have to be at least 12 years old. Then you have to pass a knowledge test. So you have to study. You have to study about how to keep a bird alive, how to trap a bird, how to train a bird, what are the medicines, how do you go hunting with a bird. So you have to pass a knowledge test. You also have to pass a hunting test because falconry is hunting, so you have to have a hunting license, of course. The first thing you're going to hunt is the bird you trap, a hawk or a falcon that you trap in the wild. That's the first thing that you trapped on your hunting permit. And then once you train it, you hope to go hunt something else. So once you take the test and pass the test, then you have to gather all the equipment and build the proper enclosure. And the enclosure is called a mews, M-E-W-S, or sometimes we call it a hawk house. And you have to have your hawk house inspected by the wardens from the California Fish and Wildlife. They will come to your house, they will check out your gear, they will look around and make sure it's proper, that they want to make sure that the bird that you're handling is going to be safe and healthy, and that you know where to get food, how to use the equipment, and how to keep your birds safe. So those are the two easy things. The third thing is the hard thing. That is, you have to apprentice under a crusty old falconer. The hard thing is to find a crusty old falconer, because a crusty old falconer, by definition, wants to be alone in the woods by themselves with their bird. They don't want to be hanging out with you. So the hard part is to find someone who is willing to put up with you as you learn the ropes under their tutorage. And if you get those three things, pass a knowledge test, also the hunting test, build the proper enclosure and get that inspected, and find a crusty master falconer or a general falconer who will apprentice you, then you can do the 4 steps. And the 4 steps of falconry are, remember, they are trap, train, hunt, and release. Those are the 4 steps of falconry. So let's just review that. That is trap, train, hunt, release. You got those, didn't you? You knew that from early on. Okay, falconry often then moves into the next permit, which is called abatement. If you love birds and you love hunting, but you love hunting so much and you love your birds so much, maybe you're not doing as much work as you should, then you find a way to make your hobby your job, and that is called abatement. Abatement is using tens of thousands of years of natural predator and prey relationships to protect things that humans care for. So what do humans care for? Humans care for wine. Humans care for health. Humans care for safe travel. Humans care for clean water and nice beaches. And humans care that their French fries aren't stolen from them when they're at a resort. So falcons and hawks can be used to protect these things. There are several companies. This one is just one I grabbed. My friend James, who you saw earlier on, worked for Adams Falconry Service, and they protect beaches, they protect golf courses, they protect crops, they protect landfills. So what they're really doing is they're using falconers and falcons to protect things we care for. Just to review, in agriculture, a lot of the things that we care for, wine grapes and blueberries, for example, I love blueberries on my cereal every morning. If we left those blueberries in the field, all the little birds would come and eat them up. So the farmer's taken time to plant the crop, to water the crop, to care for the crop. And then when the crop is ready to come in, if he goes on vacation for a weekend, he can lose all of his wine grapes or all of his blueberries in a weekend when 1,000 starlings come and nibble on his crop. So he also has to pay to protect his crop. And sometimes they do that with nets or with mylar tape or with sound cannons or scarecrows. But the best way to protect a crop from marauding birds is with their natural predator, which is a hawk or a falcon. So hawks and falcons chased after these birds on farms, at landfills, at beaches and resorts, and at buildings. A lot of pigeons like to make a nest on the top of a hospital where the air filtration is supposed to be getting you clean air. But if it's got a lot of pigeon poop right there, it's not going to get clean air into the hospital. Sometimes at resorts, the pigeons come and poop on the guests while they're out eating their French fries at the hotel. So resorts will use them. If you are going to the beach and on vacation and the beach is closed because of bacteria in the water, well, then you're not going to go on vacation there. So Catalina Island, for example, hires a falconer year-round to make sure that the beaches stay open. So they chase the birds that are going to be pooping in the water off to a distance to protect the beach. Because if there were no tourists in Catalina, there would be no business on Catalina, so they have to protect their livelihood. So that one, abatement, then moves into captive breeding because you cannot use a wild caught bird for abatement. So you can't go trap a wild bird and then go use it in the fields because it's illegal to use a natural wild animal to make money. So a lot of falconers then get a captive breeding permit so they can breed birds so they don't have to take one out of the wild. And these are two baby peregrine falcons that I raised. These are Peale's peregrine falcons. Again, it's a peregrine of the Northwest in Washington, Oregon, Canada, Alaska. And these are 4 days old, just right out of the nest. This was June 11th, a couple years back. And so captive breeding is a way that we can provide birds both for abatement and falconry without putting any pressure on the wild stock. It also gives us a chance to help the wildlife agencies reintroduce birds that are having trouble. So falconers help to reintroduce peregrine falcons out there to the DDT issues of the late 70s. They also have helped in the condor recovery. So because they know the ancient techniques of husbandry, they can help get rehab birds back into the wild, and they can help with recovery efforts. So these are those same birds. These are now 21 days old, June 11th. Here they are 23 days old, and you can see their feathers starting to come in. The down and the fluff is going away as they're growing up. And then there's 28 days old. Look at them. They're getting some feathers, getting some attitude. And if you look closely on their legs, you'll notice some bands. You can tell a wild caught bird because he does not have a band on his leg, but a captive bred bird is required to have a band. Now, this band was put on their feet when they're about 10 years old and their feet are tiny and soft and pliable. And I put the bands on these little baby birds, and that gives them a federal marking that says, yes, these are captive bred birds. These were not taken out of the wild, because you can't put a seamless metal band on a wild caught bird. These are those same birds, 46 days old. Look at them. So handsome. Oh my goodness. So these birds grew up, and in 40 days, they are the same size as their parents, actually a little bit larger, and they are ready to go flying. Both of these birds are now in raptor programs. The one on the left is in Grand Canyon. There's a place called Raptor Ranch, and you can see this bird at Raptor Ranch, and the one on the right is down in North Carolina. So these birds have gone to education programs. They're also falconry birds, so they hunt and they fly free, but they're also used in falconry programs. Again, you cannot release a captive bred bird into the wild unless you have special permission from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and they don't give that permission because they don't want captive bred birds in the wild. So the last and final permit is a permit about science. Now, science gets permit to study things like migration, population. Governments need to know what areas of land need to be protected for breeding areas. There are some secret military uses for birds. I know it's crazy, but there are wild and crazy things going on in the world. Ecotourism is a very important reason for us to study. Birds are used in collections and research. Bird feathers are used to do DNA studies to see changes over time. Bird colors and things are used. So science is the final permit. Here are my friends down from Morro Bay State Park, and they are doing bird banding. So if you look in the top right corner, if you see that guy with the headscarf on, behind him, if you look really closely, you'll see some nets. So these are nets they put up in the wild, and as the little birds fly through, they are caught, and then they are banded and recorded. Their wingspan, their age, their feathers, their length and width and weight, they're all recorded, and these bands help us in science to know where the birds are coming from, where they're going to, and more details like that. If you're really interested in the science of birds and bird migration, on Friday, I will be talking about that. Again, a free Zoom presentation in a couple days, Friday at 5 p.m. So same time, same place, same login channel if you would like to know about bird migration. So you've got 10 fingers, right? So let's do a quick review. The program is over. So let's see what you remember. There are 6 permits. The first one was, let's see if you got it right. Rehabilitation. I see some of you got it right. I don't see, but I just assume. The second one, rehabilitators have a soft heart and they don't want the birds to put to sleep, so they often have an education permit. That's right. And the education permit, then we talk about falconry. The difference between education and falconry is you cannot use you cannot keep a healthy bird for education. And do you remember there were 4 steps in falconry, and they were trap, train, hunt, and release. High five your partner if you got it. If they got it, that's really good. I'm proud of you. So we had 3 kinds of permits: rehab, education, falconry. There were some more permits. There were 3 others. What were they? The falconry one, remember those falconers sometimes had to make a living, so there is abatement. That's right. That's where they use their falcons to chase things or haze other birds that are causing a problem for things humans care for. And then captive breeding, because remember, they can't use a wild bird for abatement. They have to have a captive bred bird. And the final one we just touched on shortly was science. Again, more on science and birds. Bird migration and falcons is coming up on Friday. How many did you get? Did you get all 10? Okay, so that's the end of the program. Now we have a chance for some questions. By the way, before we get to the questions, the Morro Bay Winter Bird Festival is who supports this presentation, and it's also a fundraiser for Camp Ocean Pines in Cambria. So if you enjoyed it, you learned something, and you can use your 10 fingers and impress your friends at the next dinner party, you might want to make a donation to Camp Ocean Pines. You can do that right online easily, or you can send them a check in the mail. Sheesh, if you really want to, you could probably do some Venmo if you wanted to. But anyway, Morro Bay Bird Festival is promoting 2 more programs. On Friday, I'll be talking about bird migration, and on Saturday, a very famous naturalist, John Muir Laws, will be talking about nature journaling. So that's what's happening next. Let me see if I can stop the sharing and go back to questions. Okay, so here I am. I hope you enjoyed it. That was about 50 minutes of some nature stuff. If you have some questions and type them into the chat, then I'll try to answer them. So Michelle, did anybody have a question?
Oh, yes, Chris. There were some really great questions. And so I'm going to start with one. How fast can peregrines fly?
They've been clocked at over 200 miles an hour. That is really incredible. They were clocked by jet plane diving, and a peregrine falcon passed it while it was diving. So yes, over 200 miles an hour.
Wow. So, and that's, a repeated factual piece of information. Relative to other animals, is that one of the fastest creatures on the planet?
I think it's the fastest. That's pretty darn fast. 200 miles an hour is pretty darn fast.
Wow. That's just amazing. Thank you for that. So also I had a question about the captive breeding program. The question was, in order to breed the birds, do you have to capture a non-adult male and female? And are they used at the same time that they are breeding? So I think that was more of a logistical question about how do you manage to captively breed these falcons?
That's a good question. Well, just for the basics, and because Kingston's in the room, we do need to know that it takes a boy falcon and a girl falcon to make baby falcons. So yes, you have to have one of each. And they have to be together. So that can all happen. Mom, you can talk to Kingston later about the details on that. But yes, you have to have one of each. Now, now how you get the birds, they can be, a falconry bird can be used in breeding. A rehab bird can be used in breeding. Yes, you can have a wild caught bird used in breeding. And they have to go off your falconry permit while they're on the breeding permit. But you can, but yes, you can use a wild caught falconry bird. But yeah, you can't catch an adult bird. You have to check, you have to catch a juvenile bird and wait till it gets older, 2 or 3 years into its life before you can do breeding.
Okay, that is so interesting. Such interesting information. Another question, how do you keep the bird from imprinting when you're raising it from a young animal? And is that a concern?
Yeah, imprinting is, you've seen that old joke of a whole line of ducklings following a dog, because maybe the mama duck died and the dog wrapped around the eggs or something, and when they all hatched, they thought the dog was the mama. That's called imprinting. So if you are raising a young bird, they will imprint on humans. Sometimes you want that and sometimes you don't. When they imprint on humans, the bird thinks it is a human instead of thinking that it's a bird. So that is good when you're flying, because he's not interested in the other birds flying around because he thinks he's a human. But it's bad when they get to sexual maturity and they think you're either a partner or a rival, because then they will either try to mate with you or try to attack you. So imprint birds are a little bit tricky. So sometimes we imprint birds on purpose, especially if we're going to do captive breeding, because then we can collect the sperm and impregnate a female with sperm that's collected, or it just sometimes makes it easier. I'm sorry, Kingston, that you had to hear that. You can, it's easier to do captive breeding with an imprint bird than with a wild bird.
Okay, so basically it sounds like imprinting isn't a concern. You showed the story of some of your birds that they very rapidly, once released, let go of their imprinting impulse. Is that right?
There's a term when you calm a bird down. So you have a wild bird and you calm it down, then that's called manning. And then there's another term called hacking, where you wild it back up. And so just like you calm it down, you wild it back up, and you wild it back up by giving him free rein. You'll give him a night's lodging and a meal if he wants to come back for that, but he has all day to run around and fly around and meet the neighbors and, eat a bird at the neighbor's feeder and things like that. And once they feel wilded up enough, then they take off. But there have been reports of birds coming back a couple years later. The falconer goes out and in his backyard, his old bird is sitting on his perch. And he says, wait, you've been gone for 2 or 3 years. And some of the falconers say, my best falconry is a few days after I've released the bird, because the bird still wants to hang out with me, but I don't have any responsibility for the bird. The bird is strong and healthy, and you see fantastic flights.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Chris. We had another question. When you hunt with your bird, because we know that that's one of the 4 steps, do you hunt on public land or private land? And are there regulations about that?
It's the same regulations as any hunting. So you have a hunting license and you have to follow the hunting regulations. You have to only hunt where hunting is allowed, and you can only hunt what's in season. You can't hunt a bird out of something out of season, and you can't take more than the bag limit that's allowed in the hunting regulations. Sometimes falconers get a little bit of earlier or a later season than the normal gun hunters or archery hunters, but they have to follow the same hunting regulations because it's a hunting sport.
Okay, I just have a couple other questions here. Are Harris's hawks naturally seen on the Central Coast?
No, they're not. A Harris's hawk is normally a desert hawk. Arizona, New Mexico, Baja California, all the way down to Peru. They may have, you may see them in the wild down in Imperial Valley, down in, San Diego, East San Diego County, but they're not normally naturally occurring here. Of course, crazy things happen right here in Morro Bay. There's a zone-tailed hawk, which again is a central Mexico and Arizona hawk that's here in the Morro Bay trees right now. So it's something that hasn't been seen for years and years. So things happen. Birds go where they feel like going, but we don't have any records of breeding pairs of Harris's hawks in California, except perhaps down in Imperial Valley. But it is the most popular hawk to hunt with right now. Very common. There are lots of them out there. There have been some that will escape, and so when they escape, they will sometimes take up residence in an area. I think there are some birds, Harris hawks, that have escaped in England that are nesting in England, which is not the desert. So yes, sometimes birds get away and set up partnerships with mates if they can find them.
Okay, Chris, just 2 more questions here. When you refer to falconry, does that also include eagles?
There's another term, it's called an ostringer. And so it's an old term that includes other hawks, like goshawks, eagles, and like ferruginous hawks. And so there's another term, but just for the simplicity of tonight's discussion, I just call them falconers.
Okay, great.
And we're not called falconeers. That makes me feel like I need a Mickey Mouse hat. No, we're not falconeers, we're falconers.
Excellent. And the one question, the final question is, are you familiar or aware of the status of the peregrines on Morro Rock, or the history of that story?
Yes, in fact, here's a funny story. Well, I first came to Morro Bay in right around 1982. And I came because I was hired to be a pastor at a church. And when I was interviewing, the guy in the search committee said, well, tell me what you know about Morro Bay. And this was, again, 1982. And I said, well, I know there's a pair of peregrine falcons nesting on the rock. And he says, oh, you're not one of those crazy eco people, are you? And I said, yeah, I'm sorry, I think I am. But I still got the job, and I was a pastor at that church for 14 years, and a pastor and a naturalist at the same time. So yeah, I've followed the falcons on Morro Rock for decades.
That's wonderful.
And they're doing really well, by the way.
Oh, that's so great. Chris, I know we've kind of reached the end of our program tonight. This has been such an informative program. People are interested in your California Naturalist class, which I know if they're interested, they can just go to the Camp Ocean Pines website and look for information about that. And of course, we want to support Camp Ocean Pines in so many ways because it's such a great program. And thank you so much for donating your time and your knowledge and your expertise on such a unique and really interesting topic. So we look forward to seeing Chris again on Friday evening, starting at 6 o'clock, and having a wonderful presentation from you there. Thank you so much.
Correction, Friday evening is at 5 p.m.
Thank you. I'm so
Friday
sorry.
Evening, 5 p.m. And that's about bird migration with a focus on falcons. Then Saturday, again, boy, if you're not doing anything Saturday around 10:30, get on for the free Zoom with John Muir-Laws, one of the best naturalists around, about bird sketching and a focus on nature journaling with a focus on birds.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chris. Thank you for this presentation and for your support of Camp Ocean Pines. Thank you for all that you do for the Morro Bay Winter Bird Festival.
You're welcome. And if you all check the chat, you'll see links down there to all those things we talked about. Go on the Morro Bay Winter Bird Festival Facebook page or website, and Camp Ocean Pines Facebook page or website, and get more information. See you later, everybody. Hope you enjoyed it.